Hey, friends, welcome back to the Lifestyle School podcast, where we talk about real strategies to create the kind of life and body you actually want to live in. I'm Hope, your coach and guide through all things metabolic health, fasting, and fat loss. And today we are talking about a major piece of the puzzle that most people overlook, and that is cortisol. And listen, if you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, but still not losing weight, if you've dealt with long-term stress, burnout, or even prescribed steroids like prednisone, or maybe you constantly feel weird, sorry, not weird, wired, but tired. Maybe you have belly fat that won't budge or struggle with cravings and blood sugar dysregulation and crashes. This episode is hopefully going to connect the dots for you in a really big way. But before we get into it, again, a quick disclaimer. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a functional medicine doctor. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended as medical advice. Always consult with your doctor before making any major health changes. So let's talk about cortisol, guys. I feel like cortisol is all over social media. I keep seeing these posts of people talking about cortisol face, and I think it's kind of funny, personally, being someone who is really focused on metabolic health, because really what I see is someone who's insulin resistant and retaining a lot of extra water and fat, because that's what happens when you're hyperinsulinemic. You hold on, insulin signals your kidneys to hold on to fluid. And so you have a lot of extracellular water or like bloat water. And when your insulin comes down, you release a lot of fluid. That's why a lot of times people will lose weight quickly at first because they're losing extra bad fluid. Well, this is connected to cortisol in a way, and we're going to talk about that today. I just think it's funny because I think it's a marketing tactic, right? And yeah, I don't know. I think it's funny. So anyway, cortisol. I want to talk first start by talking about like cortisol, what it is, its role in the body, because I think anytime someone hears cortisol, they're like, cortisol, women shouldn't like work out hard because they're gonna spike their cortisol and then they're gonna die. And that's just like not the case. Cortisol isn't bad. In a healthy, working body, cortisol has a lot of really, really important jobs. Okay. And if we don't have cortisol, then we have, I believe, what's called Addison disease, where we literally don't wake up in the morning because cortisol is a hormone that spikes in our circadian rhythm. It helps us wake up in the morning. I don't know if you've ever realized, if you're someone who's had blood sugar dysregulation issues, have you ever noticed that your blood sugar is high in the morning, even though you fasted all night? It's called the dawn phenomenon. That is due to cortisol spiking to help you wake up. It signals to your body, hey, we need glucose to get energy to rise and shine and have energy. And that's cortisol. And it's super important. And if you didn't have that cortisol, you would be in a really rough spot. So we need that, right? Cortisol also helps keep blood sugar stable between meals, or, if we're fasting, we talk about counter-regulatory hormones. Cortisol is one of those, and it's really important, right? And when it's used in the right context and for the right purposes. Cortisol is actually something that also helps us fight inflammation when it shows up. So if like you have like something acute happen, in your body, you're going to have inflammation, and cortisol helps with that. So it's actually really important. It's another reason why, I'm going to have trouble saying this. I can already tell. Steroids, corticosteroids. I think I got it out right. That's why they're prescribed when people are having these like huge inflammatory flare-ups. A lot of times with like autoimmune conditions, it's because it helps dampen those, right? So cortisol does play a role in that regularly in a good, like a well operating, healthy body. It helps regulate our blood pressure and our fluid balance. And it even influences how we fall asleep at night by dancing in rhythm with our melatonin, right? So, again, going back to that circadian rhythm, it has its ups and then it has its downs, and it's really important. It's actually essential to our body. And the problem is, just like with anything else in the body, right? think it's so easy and so common for people to start demonizing these like certain things in our body. And like I never want someone to listen to me talk and feel like insulin is demonized because, it is our fat storage hormone. Like we need insulin. Type 1 diabetics, they don't have insulin and they die without it, right? So we have to have these hormones, but we need them in the right quantities and in the right rhythms within our body because everything in our body is like a dance. It's like a symphony working together. All of these different systems of our bodies are supposed to be working in harmony with each other. And that's the beautiful thing about functional medicine. As I've talked about before, my dad is a functional medicine doctor and chiropractor. He has been practicing functional medicine for over 40 years, and I had the pleasure of working with him for 8 of those years. And the real difference, I would say, between functional medicine and Western medicine, my husband is actually a medical doctor as well. So I have a nice view into both worlds. My husband and I have been together, married for almost 10 years. But Western medicine looks at the body as, individual organs and like really like the more specialized you become, the more small of an area of the body you look at. And unfortunately, many times they don't do a great job at looking at everything in context of each other, which is why you end up with like 10 different specialists, right? That you have to go see because you have, a cascade of symptoms. Where in functional medicine, and this really is part of the conversation about like chronic disease, because that's more, no one's going to see a functional medicine doctor for an acute injury like a broken leg, right? Wrong place. But in functional medicine, what we really focus on is looking at the whole body and all of the inputs and all the different systems and how they are working together in harmony. And so that is really like central to my approach for nutrition and for weight loss is, saying that like you're just eating too many calories is such like a small, narrow view of nutrition, because there's all of these, other things that are impacting how your weight is responding to your life. And, just plain and simple, a calorie from an apple versus a calorie from a Snicker bar tells your hormones different things to do, right? So I digress. I'm going to get back on track here talking about cortisol, but our bodies are amazing. They're meant to be working together in harmony, with all of the different systems and hormones, and things are great. Cortisol is great until things get out of balance. And unfortunately, we live in a culture and a society that really promotes dysfunction for a lot of these different hormones. And we're going to get into that. So there's really three main disruptors when it comes to cortisol. And the first one, I'm sure you've heard of it. I'm sure you probably know what I'm about to say, but that is chronic stress. So, that can be stress from our work, from relationships, finances, or just living in our culture, which is like, let's go, go, go. The more busy you are, the more successful you are. I feel like there is this thing in our culture where it's like the busier you can be, like the better of a person you are. And again, I think it's one of the things that if we really want to pursue health, and I talked about this in last week's episode, I believe, but like being healthy isn't just going to happen in this world that we live in. We have to make space for it, right? We have to like carve out a space, and that's going to be saying like we got to let go of other things that, aren't serving our health anymore. Because you can't just add health on top of everything you're already doing, right? You have to make space. But chronic stress is such a problem, for so many of us, whether it's like road rage stress from, and this is, personally my own personal thing that I've like been really consciously working on is, I'm driving in my car and, we live in the Bay Area, and I'm just going to be honest, there are some psycho drivers around here, from just like really, really poor drivers. I got to tell you this story. I was driving to Bible study one morning, and I'm driving behind this car, and they are just like, they're going so slow. They're like driving in the middle of two lanes. And I'm like, what is going on with this driver? And then I get closer to behind them, and there's literally a sheet of printer paper with Sharpie written on it that says, uh, uh, new, what was it exactly? I took a picture. New driver, please be patient, or like just learned to drive. And it was like an adult. It wasn't like a kid type of thing. But I just remember being like, oh my gosh, if if you have to like put a piece of printer paper on the back of your car, you shouldn't probably be driving on the freeway, right? Like where people are going 80 miles an hour. But so what I've been working on is when I'm driving, like I don't need to stress. There's not really anywhere that I need to get so fast where it's worth like getting myself super worked up because our bodies can't tell if we're being chased by a lion or if we're just like annoyed at the driver next to us on the freeway, right? Our body's having the same chemical response. And this is not healthy for, optimal health because when you're in fight or flight, your body's not going to be burning fat. Your body cortisol is driving up, and what cortisol does is it tells your body like get out the glucose. We need more glucose because we got to run. But actually, I'm just sitting in my car, pressing on a gas pedal, not expending any energy other than emotional energy and probably anger. So that is something that I am personally working on. But chronic stress looks like so many different things. I can tell you, I've worked with so many clients who are just in really tough life situations, whether that's, they're taking care of like a family member, an alien family member. That is incredibly hard. And, you can't just like get away from that. And, um, I listened to a really good podcast. It was the Huberman Lab. It was her name is Dr. Eppel. I don't remember her first name off the top of my head. And I don't have it written down, but it was all about how to deal with stress that you can't necessarily get away from, and how can you move through stress. Like you have to at some point when it comes to chronic stress, like embrace whatever hard situation you're in and figure out how can I both hold this really hard thing but no longer allow it to control me and all of my feelings and emotions and hormones, truly. And like, how can I walk through this in a way that is going to allow me to move forward and get me out of this fight or flight response? Right. And that can be extremely difficult. And, this can also look like a really hard relationship, whether it's with a family member or a spouse or even financial. So, chronic stress, like I don't want to minimize what that looks like. That can be incredibly difficult, but we have to figure out a way to walk through that stress because chronic stress is the number one disruptor of our cortisol balance. And we're going to talk in a minute about what cortisol imbalance does and looks like, but chronic stress is number one. Number two is poor sleep and circadian disruption. So things like staying up late, scrolling on our phones, doing shift work. My husband unfortunately does shift work, and I see it, every month when he has to flip to nights and then back to days. Or just having inconsistent sleep wake cycles. This is going to throw your cortisol out of balance. And this is sleep is something I am just incredibly passionate about. And if you follow me over on Instagram, I talk about it, I feel like every day. Um, or if you come to my community meeting. But if we don't make sleep a priority, we are not going to have the health and the life we want, period. Um, uh, like I was talking to my dad recently, and he has had sleep apnea for years and didn't necessarily even realize it. But he recently got a CPAP machine to wear at night. And we were just talking last weekend, and the fact that he is now sleeping through the night, there's so many different things that he's noticed in his life where he's like actually getting good sleep, like high quality sleep. And it's like changing him, right? It's so important. So whatever you need to do to prioritize sleep, whether that's, again, peeling back the schedule, letting go of commitments, maybe that's like setting a timer an hour before you like know you need to be in bed so that you start your bedtime routine an hour ahead of time. So it's not like, oh, I want to be in bed at 9:30. So at 9:30, you start your bedtime routine. So you're not in bed until like 10, and then you're not asleep till 10:30, blah, blah, blah. You know how it goes, right? And there's a ton of research that shows that if you don't go to bed at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every morning, you're not going to get as good, as deep, and as restful and as restorative sleep. And so I just really, really want to encourage you, like, have a bedtime. Like, do yourself a favor as an adult and put yourself to bed at the same time every night if you can, because it is going to incredibly help you. And if you listen to my podcast episode about leptin and ghrelin and satiety, I talk a lot about in that episode about sleep and how sleep is actually super important for regulating your cravings. I don't know if you've ever gotten a bad night of sleep, but the next day you just always want more carbs, right? You have a harder time saying no to all of the sugar and stuff that we're bombarded with. So you got to get really good sleep. You have to have really good, like a sleep wake cycle, circadian rhythm, because getting out of that, it's and it's number two when it comes to throwing our cortisol out of balance. And number three is inflammation. And this also comes with undereating or overtraining. These three things, inflammation, undereating, or overtraining, really can put your body through the ringer. I would say for most people, undereating, unless you're like a chronic dieter, isn't going to be a problem here in the US. And overtraining, I would say, from my clinical experience and working with clients, I don't know that there's a ton of people that I've ran into who are overtraining, but it definitely does happen. I've had a couple, but I would say the majority, that's not the problem. But inflammation is really a big one. And typically that's related back to the food that we are choosing to eat. And usually that has to do with, ultra processed, low quality food that's loaded with sugar and fast carbohydrates. So when cortisol is chronically high, our body thinks it's in a constant state of survival. And this is what happens next. Let's talk about what happens when our cortisol goes awry. So when cortisol rises, it tells your liver to dump glucose into your bloodstream so that you have fast energy to fight or flee, right? Just like I was saying, when I'm driving down the highway and I'm getting all upset and irritated and reacting to these bad drivers around me, my body doesn't know that I'm just sitting in my comfortable minivan, driving down the highway. It thinks like we got to get away from an animal that's trying to kill us or eat us or a bad guy or something. And, having all this glucose dumped into our system makes sense if I'm running from a bear. Thankfully, I've never ran from a bear despite all of the hiking adventures that we've done. I've actually never even seen a bear in the wild, and I'm so glad California does not have brown bears also, which just gives me so much peace. But I'm not running from a bear, so I don't need all of this glucose that is being dumped via the liver. But when you're, sitting in traffic or, sitting at home and arguing with my kids or dealing with like a crying, upset, like little child, my blood sugar is rising and it has nowhere to go. So from there, what happens is our body, what does it do to help get that blood sugar into the cells and out of our bloodstream? If you've been around for a while, you know that our pancreas produces a bunch of insulin to try to help deal with all this blood sugar that's being dumped from the liver. And as you know, the more cortisol we have, the more blood sugar, and then the more insulin we have, this is going to be resulting in our body shifting into fat storage mode because that is what high insulin does. It's this like circular cascade effect. We spike our cortisol because we're stressed or we're not sleeping. We have higher blood sugar. Actually, this is something that's really interesting too that I want to note. I wore a continuous glucose monitor for a month at the beginning of this year, 2025. And I did notice that my blood sugar was higher if I didn't get good sleep. And I'm sure it just had to do with my cortisol being higher, but actually, I think I'm just thinking back and making that connection now. But higher the blood sugar is, the more insulin that's being produced. And it's just like this vicious cycle, right? So over time, this leads to insulin resistance. It can lead to belly fat accumulation, especially visceral fat, which is the most dangerous fat we can have, which is fat around our organs, which, then leads to things like fatty liver disease and whatnot. It's going to lead to a lot of cravings and energy crashes, like reactive hypoglycemia, where your blood sugar spikes really high, a bunch of insulin's released, and then your blood sugar crashes really low, and then you feel really off and jittery. And it's going to lead to sleep disturbances. And in the end, it's going to slow down our metabolism. So we want to, at all costs, avoid, these superficial things that, driving in my car, I can know if I really want to be healthy long term, I can no longer allow myself to be bothered by these people. I just have to like learn to let it go. And so I want to also now just like touch on something before we go into things that we can do to start to reset our rhythm when it comes to our cortisol. But I want to talk real quickly about the role of steroids because I've had so many clients. Autoimmune conditions are so prevalent now. I have had so many clients that I've worked with who've been on prednisone or a steroid for whatever reason, whether it be short or chronically. And I just think it's a good thing to talk about when it comes to weight loss because it's like a really big factor. So steroids are a massive cortisol disruptor, if you weren't aware of that. And most people don't understand what's happening in their body when they're on it. I remember years ago having a really long conversation with a client who was having a really bad autoimmune flare and was on prednisone and started gained a ton of weight, I think almost 100 pounds, started getting facial hair, then it led to PCOS, just like a disaster, right? And I think so many people don't understand when they start on something like prednisone. And, some people, they need it for a time at least. But they don't understand what's happening in their body when they start it. And so I think it's really important. And I just like want you to know so that if you are ever faced with this or a loved one is, that you can just be aware, right? So prednisone is a form of synthetic cortisol. I mean, and it's often life-saving and absolutely necessary in acute cases, but it's a much stronger and longer lasting form of cortisol than what our body naturally makes. And so while you take it, this is what's happening in your body. Your blood sugar is going up and it's staying up. Your insulin is going up and it's staying up. Your fat storage is then just turned on. And if you listen to my hunger, not my hunger episode, but my episode about satiety, so maybe, yeah, I guess you could say my hunger episode, but it's going to increase your appetite, especially for things like sugar and carbs and salt. And it's going to promote the breakdown of muscle, which can slow your metabolism even more because we know our muscles are like a sink for glucose. They're very metabolically active tissue. And so here's also the kicker when it comes to prednisone. And, if you are on prednisone or you need to be, I'm not a doctor and I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to inform you of what's going on so that you can have more, like a more informed approach to how you look at your eating and how you look at your lifestyle. If and when you or someone you love is, potentially on this drug. Your own adrenal glands, which are what produce cortisol, they can shut down, and production of natural cortisol while you're on steroids typically lowers or even stops. So when you stop taking prednisone, especially if you stop it abruptly, you can crash really hard. And that's called adrenal suppression. And that's why if you are on a medication, I always make sure everyone knows you like need to be working with your physician who prescribed the medication to make sure that you can get off of it safely, if that is your goal. And when it comes to autoimmune conditions, I guess I was like, oh, should I share this? Should I not? But when I worked in clinic with my dad in the functional medicine clinic for 8 years, we worked with many people who had autoimmune conditions. It's like one of the bread and butter things we did. And really, my dad's interest in working with individuals with autoimmune conditions started when he met my mom right after he finished chiropractic school. So my mom was 20 years old and she was about to have a portion of her colon removed because she had such bad ulcerative colitis. She wasn't digesting any food. It was just like coming straight through her. And they wanted to give her a colectomy bag, which is where they removed the majority of the colon. And then you have, or is it it's an ostomy bag? I think I just called it the wrong thing. Anyway, a bag to collect her stool, essentially, she would wear on the outside of her body. And my dad had just met her and he was like, no, 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 like let's pause before we do such like a drastic surgery. And again, this is like in the early 80s. He's like, let's do an elimination diet because they didn't have food sensitivity testing back then. And he said, let's do an elimination diet. See if there's any foods contributing to this and see if we can, do anything naturally to get you better. Long story short, my mom found out she had severe food sensitivities, not allergies. She has food sensitivities to rice, to corn, to peanuts, to gluten, and to dairy. Those were like the five big ones. And so my mom removed all of those foods from her diet. And long story short, it's now 40 years later. My mom is in her 60s. She has actually never been on any steroids for her autoimmune condition. She's always managed it naturally with diet and lifestyle. She is in amazing shape. She does ballet multiple times a week. She weighs a similar weight to what she did in high school. She's very fit and active, is constantly running around with my kids, getting up on and off of the floor. And I just want to say, I just want to encourage you, if you are someone who's dealing with an autoimmune condition, because I know it can be very scary and it can be really life altering, the symptoms of an autoimmune condition. Find a functional medicine doctor who's going to help you heal your leaky gut, who's going to help you address like the root cause of what's causing that inflammation in your body and your immune system to be attacking yourself, right? Because I've seen it over and over again where people have been able to arrest their autoimmune condition in clinic working with my dad. And so, I mean, he takes clients from all over the country. People fly to him to have treatment and then they'll do it from a distance. But if that is something that you would be interested in, please email me. I'd love to connect you with their clinic because they do absolutely amazing work. And it was just like such an honor and a privilege to get to work with my dad and learn from him for those 8 years that I was there. And also just to be a part of so many patients' stories of healing when they were pretty much told, like, you're just going to have to live with this for the rest of your life. So anyway, that was a total sidebar. But I just want to encourage you, if you or someone you love are dealing with an autoimmune condition, there are alternative ways to start addressing the root cause of that immune system dysfunction, which is what an autoimmune condition is. So let's bring things back and talking about cortisol and how to start recovering from, maybe having cortisol, your cortisol out of whack. Maybe you were on a steroid intermittently. Maybe you just have been through a really high stress situation in your life. Like you've had some chronic stress from work, life, or relationship, and you just feel like you're a little out of whack, right? Your stress has been crazy. Your sleep has been crazy. And you want to try to start getting back into a good rhythm. I'm going to give you a couple steps to start to do that. So number one is we need to start really working on our circadian rhythm when it comes to regulating cortisol. So getting sunlight in your eyes first thing in the morning is a big part of that because that triggers your cortisol melatonin cycle. So if you wake up with the sun or maybe a little bit before, but if you can wake up around the time the sun comes up, at the latest, and then get up and go outside and have some sunlight in your eyes, even for just 5 minutes in the morning. That can do so much for your cells. We're not going to get into the nitty gritty of it, but what it does is it triggers your melatonin production like about 14 up to 16 hours later in the day, which is going to help you fall asleep. Because at the end of the day, you want your melatonin to rise and your cortisol to dip. Again, it's that symphony we talked about so that you can fall asleep when it's bedtime. And a big thing when it comes to falling asleep at bedtime is you have to limit screens and blue light at night. And actually, that just makes me realize I'm about to have a timer go off on my phone because I've recently set some alarms on my phone to remind me to put on my blue light glasses at night so that if I'm looking at screens or if I have a lot of artificial light on in my house, like my eyes aren't being exposed to them. And it's kind of weird because everything looks like red when I look through them, but you really want to limit screens and blue light at night. There's a ton of research to back that up. And that is going to help you fall asleep and have better melatonin production at night. And again, melatonin and cortisol work in symphony with each other. And then you got to go to bed and wake up at the same time every day, even if it's the weekend. I know that might not feel very cool if you're in your 20s. I think about myself in my 20s and oh my goodness, my sleep wake schedule was such a disaster. But now I'm in my mid 30s, and let me tell you, I love going to bed at 9 or even 8:30 on a Friday or Saturday night because I just feel so good the next morning. And there's just nothing like starting your day like feeling like you actually have some energy, especially when you have three kids who are going to be bombarding you with questions within, within 1 minute of them waking up. So I try to wake up before them so I have like a moment of peace. But step number two is going to be balancing blood sugar. And this is the bread and butter of what we talk about at Lifestyle School. If you ever work with me, this is what we talk about because it's central to really everything. But you got to prioritize protein and fat at every meal. Eat your carbs last, not first. The order in which you eat your food is directly going to impact your blood sugar response. As I was saying earlier, I wore that continuous glucose monitor and I saw that in action. I like tested it out and it worked. So eat carbs last, if at all. And then use vinegar before meals, especially if you're going to have starches. Vinegar is incredibly protective against starches. So, have 1 tablespoon of apple cider vinegar diluted in water for like 30 minutes before you eat a meal that has starches in it. What that's going to do is it's going to delay gastric emptying of your stomach. So it's going to result in uh, like a more mild curve for your blood sugar. And then go for a walk after you eat. It's a great way to get outside, get some fresh air, move your body, but that's going to really help mobilize your blood sugar. And again, I tested this out when I had my continuous glucose monitor and I was shocked by how well it worked. And I didn't even have to walk fast. And then lastly, avoid naked carbs. And what I mean by that is don't eat carbs by themselves. Like if you're making dinner and you're hungry, it's so easy to like go to the cabinet and just like grab a couple crackers or chips or something. And that's really like the absolute worst thing you can do for your blood sugar is eating sugar or carbohydrates by themselves because they're just like immediately turned into glucose in your body and then you're gonna have a blood sugar spike. And that's gonna promote the insulin production and then it's gonna result in more body fat. And step number three is rebuild muscle and resilience. So strength training 2 to 3 times per week is going to help you build muscle and it's going to help build insulin sensitivity. And I know this goes contrarian to some of those cortisol face girlies on Instagram, but I hate to break it to you. You can strength train 2 to 3 times per week very safely as you build back your cortisol. I mean, don't become a marathon runner. If you feel like your cortisol is out of balance, maybe don't do like hour-long HIIT workouts 7 days a week, right? Just like use some common sense. But for sure, strength train 2 to 3 times per week. Walk daily, not as a punishment, but as like fuel for your mitochondria, the engines of your cells. And then, slowly build back as you are balancing out your cortisol. And then step four is, again, these are very basic things, but they have huge impact, is focus on your hydration with minerals, especially sodium and potassium. Use magnesium glycinate at night to support sleep and calm the nervous system, and make room in your week for rest, not just sleep, but true like real recovery. So if you find yourself in the middle of a workday and things are just crazy, if you can step away from a moment, if you can get outside, go do a lap around the parking lot or go like walk up a couple flights of steps and then down, or just like make a lap around the office building. Or maybe, you're stay-at-home mom with your kids and they're driving you a little bit crazy. Um, Put yourself in timeout. I've done it. I tell my kids they're 8, 6, and 3. Mom needs a timeout right now. She's having a bad attitude. So I'll just go put myself in timeout. But we have to make room for that rest, for that real recovery. And that's going to really help start regulating our cortisol. So, final thoughts before we go. I want to emphasize this because I think, especially women, I think we deal with this, but we don't need to be perfect, guys. This is not going to look perfectly. We should have no expectation of perfect because that's just going to, make the stress of it more. We just need to be in rhythm with our hormones, with our food, our movement, and our recovery. Cortisol, I want to emphasize this again, is not our enemy. Insulin is not our enemy. It's not our enemy, guys. It's not our enemy. They're just messengers. And when they're out of balance, you're not broken. They're just asking for you to pay attention to them. And so we should, right? So if this episode hit home for you, I would be so honored and so thankful if you could share it with a friend who's maybe stuck in survival mode right now. And if you've been listening to the podcast, you're enjoying it, if you could like it and subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, that would help me. If you could share it on Instagram and tag me, that just helps me get the words out. I put a lot of work into these podcast episodes every week, and I would just love if you could help me get the word out about what I'm actually doing here. And then lastly, if you're ready to stop guessing and start healing your metabolism from the inside out, I would love for you to check out my course, Lifestyle School for Weight Loss. And I also have an additional 8-week coaching program that you can do with that, where you work with me one-on-one for 8 weeks. And I take you step by step through the process of bringing your hormones and your energy and your fat loss back into balance and alignment without tracking every bite or living in fear of food. It's a very sane lifestyle approach to weight loss. And I would love to work with you if you feel like you need that help along the way. But hopefully you feel like you're getting so many good takeaways from this podcast that maybe you don't even need lifestyle school, right? I'm going to put myself out of business. Anyways, as always, I want to say thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Lifestyle School podcast.